Hi, this is David with David's Tutorials. In today's video, I'd like to share with you the details about my very first computer. The year was 1981. I had just heard about these marvelous new inventions coming out called the personal computers, and there were several of them. I can't remember the names of them right now. I'll probably put them in a list here if I can think of them later. But I remember there was the Atari, and that was a computer, the X64, I believe it was. And there were, oh goodness, a whole bunch of other ones. One of them looked like a sewing machine. And IBM was rumored to be coming out with a computer, but it hadn't come out yet. But I went out and I bought a Radio Shack TRS-80 Model 3. This was a marvelously advanced computer. It had the keyboard and the monitor all in one unit, and it had a whopping 16 kilobytes of RAM. For those not totally familiar with computer terminology, a byte, B-Y-T-E, is 1 unit of storage. It consists of 8 bits, and a bit is a binary digit. It's electrical current that is on or off. It's binary, on or off. And you put 8 of those together, 8 bits together, that makes a byte, B-Y-T-E, and that is 1 unit of storage. Now, if you do the math, you'll figure out that 8 bits can store up to 256 different numbers, and computers, they basically run on numbers. That's all they run on today. They run on numbers. So with a byte of information, you can store up to 256 numbers. Everything off is a 0, everything on is 255. Add the 0 to the 255, you have 256 different numbers. And that's what a byte is. A kilobyte, kilo is, I believe it's Greek for 1,000, and essentially it's a power of 2. It's not exactly 1,000, it's 1,024, which is 2 to the 8th power. It had a whopping 16 kilobytes of storage in that unit. And the mass storage device on my first computer, it was a cassette tape drive, about the size of a large hardback book, and it stored pretty much anything I was able to type into the computer. It stored that. Well, I subscribed to a magazine called 80 Microcomputing, and through that, and going through the manuals that came with the computer, and there were a lot of them, I began to learn TRS-80 BASIC. BASIC means Basic All-Purpose Symbolic Instruction Code. And that's one of the first languages that I learned, and I started learning how to do stuff on that computer. Well, while I was learning that computer, they came out, of course, with more advances, and the first thing I did was I upgraded my RAM. And I didn't tell you what RAM is. RAM is Random Access Memory. This is basically like a chalkboard. You can type things into it, and it stays in the memory as long as the power is on. And whenever you turn the power off, it's like you erase the chalkboard. Everything goes away that was in RAM. That's the difference between RAM and the other kind of memory they have is ROM, and this is what the factory puts in there. ROM means read-only memory, and that's the kind of memory that stays on. It keeps its information when the power goes off. So that's the difference between RAM and ROM. Now, you know, if you never knew that before, probably you did. Most people today are computer literate, but this is just for those who haven't had that basic information yet. In case you didn't know, I did teach a college course in the 1980s of computer literacy, basic computer information, and this is the kind of stuff I taught. I said, okay, the difference between hardware and software. Software is like the information contained in a book. Hardware is the book cover and the pages with no information on them. Hardware is something, if you drop it on your foot, it hurts. Software is just information. Okay, that's enough computer literacy for right now. But I will tell you that I upgraded the RAM in my very first computer from 16 kilobytes all the way up to a massive 64 kilobytes. Who could fill up 64 kilobytes of information? That's just a lot of information. So I did that, and in order to do that, I had to learn to take the computer apart, to pull the chips out and put the new chips in, and I learned that stuff, just one little thing at a time. If you learn one thing at a time, you can learn pretty much anything you want to. And then later on, I spent a whopping $750. That's a lot of money back in the 1980s. This is the early 1980s. I spent $750 to upgrade my mass storage from that cassette tape drive to two internal floppy disk drives. These disk drives took floppy disks that were 5 1/4 inches in diameter, and they would store not just 64 kilobytes of information, they would store 160 kilobytes of information once you put them in there. And then later on, I learned how to cut the notch in the other side and turn the floppy disk into what's called a flippy disk, and I could record the information on both sides. So on one disk, I could store 320 kilobytes of information. And that was the state of the art back in the early 1980s. Well, along came the 1990s, and they upgraded and they got a new computer, and the processor that I had, it was running at 4 kilohertz. Kilohertz meaning 1,000 cycles per second. And I got a new computer, and they called it a screamer at 12 kilohertz. The computers today, they're not even measuring kilohertz very much because they're way, way up there. They're very, very fast. So I got the screamer, and it had the bigger floppy disk drives. Did not have a hard disk drive yet, but they were advertising hard disk drives in 80 microcomputing, and I could get a 1.2, no, I take it back, I think it was a 1,500 kilobyte, more than a megabyte, floppy disk drive for $1,500. And it was like, wow. But I was in a financial position, I didn't want to go for it yet at that time. The next computer after I got that, it had a hard disk drive, and it would hold a whopping 20 megabytes. Now you got to understand, these advances in computer technology came along one at a time, and every one that came out, it was like, wow, this is great. We got so much new storage capacity, processing capacity. It started off, the monitor that I had in my very first TRS-80 Model 3 computer, it had 40 characters high by 80 characters across, and it only had the characters, and it did not have any graphics at all. My second computer also only had characters, but by then I had bought Microsoft Quick Basic, and I was writing programs in Quick Basic, and it was a lot of fun. And they had come out with a telephone bulletin board system. You could hook up your computer to a modem and dial this special number where somebody else had a computer that would answer the number, and you could type messages and leave them on a bulletin board. And I got involved in several bulletin boards. One of my favorites was a police officers and supporters bulletin board. And I remember talking to several police officers there, including one in New Jersey, because these computers that ran these bulletin boards connected to other computers that would run bulletin boards, and they would exchange messages between one. And one of the police officers, I was in Montgomery, Alabama at the time, and one of the police officers was from New Jersey, and they had also just come out with video cameras. Of course, these were the great big giant models that went over your shoulder, and they took a giant cassette tape, and I put on the bulletin board, there's a lot of people that commit crimes, and then they come to court and they claim they didn't commit the crime, and they call the police officer a liar. For $1,000 per unit, they could install a video camera in every police car, and they could begin recording whenever they had a traffic stop. And you may not be able to get the audio because the microphone on the camera did not pick up the audio outside the police car, but at least you would have the video evidence when the police officer said, the suspect attacked me, and the perpetrator said, no, I did not. Then you would have video evidence. And this police officer in New Jersey says, that's a great idea. I'm going to forward it up to my captain. Well, today, every police car has got dash cams. And this is one of those ideas whose time had come. The technology is there, and the more technology it is, the more people there are thinking about how to use it, and there's inevitably going to be many people that think of the same idea. But that was just one of the things I remember from back in the 90s on the bulletin board software. And then later on, I got into the Air Force in Montgomery, and they bought 3 Zenith Z80 computers. They looked a lot like the TRS-80 Model 3, except they had 2, count them, 2 floppy disk drives, and they also had a hard disk drive that held 10 gigabytes. I said, well, I've got 20 gigabytes at home, but 10, that's going to be good enough. And at that point, I wrote an entire series of 34 programs, and it was a Zenith computer, and they had ZBasic in that computer. And I wrote all these programs in ZBasic, 34 programs that totally automated the academic instructor school, which is where I was working at the time. And it wound up, one of the programs I wrote saved the administrative people 3 days of labor. What they used to take 3 days to do, the computer would then do in about 3 minutes. And they were like, wow, we didn't know we could do this. And computers are great. And what I used to tell the students in my computer literacy classes is that computers are dumb. They only do what you tell them how to do, but they do it very fast, and they do it exactly the same every single time. So don't get mad at the computer if it doesn't do what you want it to do. You just have to learn how to tell it what you want it to do, and it will be able to do it. At that point, there came out a little ditty in a Reader's Digest that I just thought was so funny, I've remembered it to this day. I believe it was in the University of Wisconsin Computer Department. Somebody had put a little piece of doggerel short poem on their bulletin board that said, I hate this new computer here. I wish that they would sell it. It never does just what I want, but only what I tell it. And that's just so true. When I told that to the students in my computer literacy classes, they all laughed. They say, yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. But today, I have this computer right here that I'm using. It's a Dell Precision, and if you go buy a Dell Precision, I'm not going to get any commission from that because it's just the computer that I have found. I went with PCs instead of Macs because when I was getting into computers big time, PCs were the big business computer, and like 85 to 90% of all computers ran on the Microsoft operating system. And so if I was going to write software, I wanted to write it for the big market, and Macs were pretty much only for graphic artists. That, of course, has evolved now such that the Macs are very powerful business computers, and PCs are also very good at graphic arts. At that time, I was writing software for PCs, and I wound up getting this computer, which now has an Intel i7 processor, and that, of course, has been supplanted in supremacy by the Mac M1 Pro Max, which is what I got in a Mac because I wanted to do Mac stuff too. You've seen me do that on my vlog channel here. But the M1 now has been supplanted by the M2, and now it's just come out the M3 processor, and hopefully Intel will catch up and get their processors to run just as fast. But as of right now, my Dell PC, it not only runs really blazingly fast, it also has 6 terabytes of hard drive space, as well as 64 gigabytes, I think, of RAM. It's just so much going on in the computer world development. I just get confused with what is the latest thing. I have a video out on my Basic Video Maker channel on how I put 6 terabytes of hard drive into this computer. So who could store 6 terabytes of information? Well, if you make videos, you can fill up 6 terabytes. Believe me, I'm able to do that. But as it is right now, my very first computer with a cassette tape drive with 4 kilobytes of RAM running at 4 megahertz. It just seems like so long ago, but it was only 1981. So that's about 42 years ago. It's a long time ago considering people's lives, but it's a blink of the eye in terms of historical progress of technology. Some people remember when the TV was brand new. I remember when I was a very small child, my parents, they got a television. Ooh, and it came in a console. I think it was only like about 10 inches on the diagonal, but I remember my dad watching the boxing matches on this black and white television. And then several years later, they came out with color television. Ooh, color. And now everybody expects that it's a normal thing. So it just goes to show you, technology marches on, and we just can't wait to see what we have in the future. This last year, we've had artificial intelligence, and that has increased the pace of technological development another order of magnitude. It just totally boggles the mind. But now you know a little bit about what I had as my first computer. I hope you enjoyed the video. Give me a thumbs up if so, and give me a comment down in the comment section if you have memories of your very first computer, and tell me what those were. Share this video with other people you think may enjoy it, and if you're already a subscriber, thank you so very much. I appreciate every single one of you, and if you're not, go ahead right now, click that subscribe button and then the bell icon so YouTube will let you know when I post another great video right here on David's Tutorials and Vlog channel. Meantime, everybody, have a marvelous day, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.